If you look at the problems we are facing in the world right now around hunger, if you look at the problems that we are facing around epidemics and things like HIV and AIDS, if you look at the problems that we're facing around financial systems and that we have the wrong incentives in place for certain groups to be making more money than others and a very skewed distribution of wealth in the world right now, these are big problems.
If you look at what's happening now, there have been fundamental changes in the way people think about problems, the kinds of problems that occur, and certainly the impact on design. It's the issue of how the design mind, with this potential to use creativity to defeat habit, how that mind gets used effectively in solving really complex problems that can only be solved with human solutions. So all of these changes, all of these dynamics are occurring simultaneously. It's a point at which design can be extremely powerful in solving problems. Or if designers conceive of themselves too simplistically, they can be irrelevant. So it's a very challenging moment for design where the potential, the upside potential is huge. The need for change is pretty huge too.
In an ambiguous problem, you don't know what you don't know. The situation is changing constantly, and you don't necessarily have one path that can go through that. You have to be responsive and adaptive to whatever the situations are and how they're changing. So if a complex problem is like playing chess, an ambiguous problem is like inviting your in-laws over for dinner for the first time. Yeah, you're having dinner, but there's a lot of other issues that are going on there, and navigating your way through that is not a very easy thing to do.
Tools of design help us with these kind of difficult problems that have several difficult constraints. Why? Because when we have an issue like that, there's just no way around thinking of different possible alternatives, and that's something designers are very good at.
Design tends to think of things more in terms of products and services, but they don't necessarily think in terms of what is that higher calling, what's that higher purpose, what's that real vision of how a company, how an organization, how a government can have a massive impact on the world and then consecrate itself to that higher calling.
My first idea is probably not going to be the best one. I can't fall in love with that. I need to explore different alternatives until I find a direction that could really solve a big and hairy problem with many difficult constraints. That's what design thinking is all about.
Okay. All right, so you've had some time to prototype. The coaches are now going to come out of their cohorts and do a run-through with you. So act as though the coaches are your users.
Design thinking.
Design thinking.
Design thinking.
Design thinking.
So I have not heard of design thinking.
I haven't heard that expression before.
I mentioned it to my girlfriend, and she definitely heard of it, but I honestly hadn't.
Action.
Action, exactly.
So right now there are about 130 students who before yesterday morning had not had any exposure to design thinking. The topic that they're working on is redesigning the savings experience. And so they were exposed to all different kinds of user needs, people who are married, people who are students, people who are 70 and thinking about retirement.
What happened was, after I got tenure, I found that I was out there in the university team teaching with different professors. So I taught with an art professor, I taught with a computer science professor, I taught with a business school professor, and I found those classes to be fascinating, right? Because they would bring their students and I would bring my students, and we'd form a class, right?
And that kind of multidisciplinarity really provides an interesting opportunity to solve problems that don't fit neatly in any one discipline. So we're looking at problems around global poverty, we're looking at the financial services.
Save lives, or we're working on the solar car, which is going to save energy, or we're working on a project that's really going to be great fun at a Halloween party. It doesn't have to be significant. we take them through this kind of step-by-step process where they start to be mindful. Oh, that's how I did it. Oh, that's where I synthesized ideas. Oh, that's where I built prototypes and showed them to other people.
It's really about acquiring a broad range of skills that helps you look at the world with complexity, preserve the tensions that other people have said, actually, it's a trade-off. We have to do this or we have to do this.
So many people think that it's kind of like in your genes. You're a creative person or you're not. I don't buy that. It's like playing the piano with practice.
Examples of stuff that we make in the process everywhere. Everything from quick prototypes to finished, kind of almost finished products. And having a physical workshop is absolutely key to what we are as designers. My definition of design thinking is applying the methodologies and approaches of design and designers to a broader set of issues and problems in business and society. In fact, if you can go back and look at design writers from many years ago, and you'll find the term being used in various contexts. But I think in terms of currently where it came from, for me anyway, was really at Stanford originally. And I think David Kelly, because they were in a teaching environment, they were trying to figure out, well, how do we talk about what it is we do, and how do we talk about this kind of methodology of design and how it applies in the world.
This was given to me by my grandmother, so it has meaning to me. That's one way to add meaning to a product. Remember this from my childhood, when this thing to measure your feet, something that's scientific or something that's from a different country, rivets from the original Golden Gate Bridge. Design is a sport where you have to actually participate, right? It's really hard to get passion for something if you're not involved with it. It's like, you know, I've never gone to Burning Man. People always talk about Burning Man. I can't get excited about Burning Man. I've never been there, right? But I'm sure if I went once, then I'd get what it is.
And of course, David and I work very closely together, and we were interested in a lot of the same things at IDEO, not so much teaching students, but in terms of teaching the world and teaching our clients a perspective on how we solve problems.
Design thinking was a term that arose in order to distinguish between what others think of as design, which is usually just the surface, to the thinking behind. Thinking is something you do first and then you make. And it's also a couple of processes. Begin from where the user is and understand human needs through a kind of ethnography and observation. Then to brainstorm and diverge and understand what all the possibilities might be, and then to prototype and to improve the prototype through iteration. As I understand it, these are the fundamental pieces of design thinking.
You know, people have said if nature didn't create something, an Autodesk customer probably did. Someone designed it. We'll see in the next 10 years different means of realizing your designs. So, for example, 3D printing, been in the works for 20 years, but it's now starting to hit the mainstream, where we can actually, through additive techniques, create forms that we were never able to create before. There's some working mechanisms there. That one would be hard to create in the real world. Spring. There's someone's foot. And the key things about the way designers work, think, and are educated is to think in an integrative fashion, to bring things together and think about systems and how the systems relate.
This is Material Connection. Fantastic. I bought it. It's very scary picture. You see how two people are fighting, but actually it's one person fighting with himself.
Inside, maybe.
Inside, yes, anxiety. So I think we are in a material age now. We really are living a material age. And in the old days, you know, there's a chart of materials or elements from the chemistry lessons you learned. where there were 104, 110, 120 materials. I'm not saying we are inventing new classification system, but we have at least 6,000 materials in our data bank. You know, it's still questionable what is good design, but it's also a big subject if we want to discuss what good design means. And this is originally called Namiki pen. It's slender and beautiful. So the new pen of this is thick. It's like a fat version. Why did they change it? I really don't have the answer. Because good design in this case, of course, is the proportion. It works well, and they've made it worse. It usually has to be better, right? Well, so much for that.
Design is the act of seeing something that we want to be better, and then the activity of making it better. It usually starts by someone seeing a problem, but it's up to that first conversation to begin questioning, does the problem as stated represent the problem that we should observe? It's just like in medicine. I may go to a doctor and say, I have a pain here, and the doctor may realize the problem isn't here, the problem's over here. And it's the design conversation's responsibility to diagnose, if you will.
If I asked you to build me a bridge, what would you do? If you build a bridge, you could build that cantilever bridge or a suspension bridge or, right, a whole bunch of different kinds of bridges. But if you ask me why, and I say I need to get across this body of water, right, then what solutions might you come up with? A boat, swimming, give me a wetsuit, right? A tunnel, an airplane, right? Oh, and a bridge. So by asking why, I've now completely reframed what it is, right? If you ask me why again, and I say, oh, I need to get a message to the other side, right? Now what ideas do you have? Yeah, I don't have to go across now, right? So how can I get a message to the other side?
Sometimes when you ask why, you're sort of a bit of a troublemaker. You know, that question, what is an acceptable question? Why is a much tougher question to answer. This is where we started. This syringe is a real basic syringe, this and many others like it. We usually call it well-engineered but not well-designed. If you pull the cap off, watch my right hand, especially if the cap is sticky, which it is sometimes, the cap will come off and you'll see a bit of a recoil and accidentally stick yourself when you're taking the cap off, which is counterintuitive, but you know, a popular way to stick yourself.
And you can push it like that too, right?
Yeah, and actually what we find is that there are many, many different styles. Some people are doing it like this. You know, some people may do it like this with a thumb. Some people will do it two-handed.
This is a little detail. So this metal spring, we call it a flower. It's actually pretty ingenious. It's got all these very small details. And this actually gets press fit into here using this tool. When this thing slides over this, like such, it's on. So the next time you pull this off, these little teeth here clamp onto the plastic and it won't come off accidentally.
Design research is much, much, much different than marketing research. So for instance, we may look at perception and we may do that qualitatively or quantitatively, where actually responses, perceptions can be measured. And we could also say, did males think differently than females? Did older people think differently than younger people? Or was, you know, people in one profession different than people in another profession in the way they think? Watch the white dot, and I'm going to show you 3 different displays. Tell me how much fuel I have in the car. Okay, watch again. By designing this display to be an area of color, a large area of color, it's much, much easier to read. It doesn't require accurate focus, and you can even see it out of your peripheral vision. Our description of design for everybody may be a little bit different.
We want to accommodate as many people as possible. Again, it's my 1960s radical student sensibility of, power to the people. In a way, it was about eliminating segregation in design.
If you want to have a good idea, have lots of ideas. So we have a brainstorm, we come up with 100 ideas in, 10 minutes.
If you try stuff, that doesn't mean spending $1 billion trying something and having that fail. You have to think cleverly and say, how can I have the first try for a $10,000 investment? And that way, if it doesn't work out so well, that's not going to kill us. And so changing from, I have to wait and wait and wait and wait until I get it absolutely perfect and invest more and more and more time in getting it perfect, and then I'll show it to you. We want them to think, I'm gonna go really early. I'm gonna say, I've just done some preliminary thinking. What do you think? You can trash it if you want. Just tell me what you think, and then do it over and over again. And that I think ends up feeling very liberating to these students, who many of them are highly kind of analytically trained, and they've come from a world where they've got to get the right answer.
I make stuff up. Okay. Whoever done it, it's a really nice.
Design thinker.
I think probably more like a guy who just, all right, but I make stuff up. I'm making T-shirts,
Old ones like this, right? The classic meter,
or
it has the round shape because it's got a time indication that's tipping like this, and this is sort of doing the same thing.
The one thing about cities is that they're pretty strapped for human resources. So just managing the situation, having thousands of these in the street, and you have 100 people just operating them. I think we could figure out a way that basically throws the coins under the bus, so to speak. We don't deal coins, everything is digital.
My designer friends that I've known for so long, the designer couple, is they just never mind trying something. They just don't mind being wrong, having a bad idea, as long as that being wrongness and that bad idea helps them get the next stage of a good idea, and the next stage and the next stage.
So say I want to log in and reserve a table on OpenTable or something.
Yeah.
And then wouldn't it be cool if I could reserve a parking spot when I show up, I see it?
Yeah.
So I wonder how we would indicate that within some of these guys.
You may be able to put in a reservation related to your dinner reservation. So when you pull up, you kind of get like automatic Rockstar parking.
If I'm entering something on my smartphone, and then I'm gonna take my 2 hours and put it on the device, I can use this sort of gesture across it. Give it back to me.
We find it kind of a historical street furniture, and we want to design it, and some really interesting ones that are actually dealing with non-object.
It looks like a bump. It's like I've shown up and because it's raised, that one's reserved now. I can't park there. Right?
You go over by the federal building.
Yeah.
And they have all these anti people charging the building.
Anti-terrorism.
They come out of the ground. The posts.
Transparency's got that too.
Yeah, what if they it's
posts come out of the ground?
Oh, that would be wonderful. If you exceed it, it basically lifts your car. No. It just 2 inches above ground, so your wheels are.
And the idea is that it's kind of protected from the sun and the elements, and the screen doesn't have to compete with the sunlight when it's coming down.
So the design output from design thinking, the idea of making creative leaps in order to come up with a solution, the idea of representing those leaps with prototypes or renderings or some form of communicating device, the idea of choosing between them and then going forward and developing concepts that allow people to not just be problem solvers using their explicit thinking, but also be problem solvers using tacit knowledge, using the learning by doing, and finding that they come up with solutions because they build things, they're making things, they're coming up with solutions using intuition.
This is really nice, the inside. we're doing screen here. The notion of illumination in the inside is really nice.
It could also shade the screen from sunlight.
Yeah. And it protects against rain. And it's a wonderful bird's house.
When Skype came up, okay, was that 2003? They said, oh, you know, Skype, free calling can't work. It's not serious. You can't offer phone calls for free. They're going to disappear. So they didn't take Skype seriously. Well, you know what happened? Skype today is the largest operator of international phone calls. They own 13% of the market. Now what happened is that these senior executives, they were thinking of the industry through the lens of their business model. Running large-scale network, which costs money, you can't give that away for free. What they didn't realize is that Skype has a different business model. Skype has zero network. It's a software company, and their network is the internet. So for them, it doesn't cost them any money to offer a call for free. But these senior executives didn't take the time to analyze the business model. They would have understood, we're doomed.
My name is Jefferson McCarley. I am the general manager of Mission Bicycle Company. We are a company that makes bicycles made to order, custom for each customer, one at a time. This is our frame. It is about 4 pounds, so it's a very light. So we start with matte black. That's one of the most popular colors. We get to choose another color, which we know all of these colors look really fantastic. These are our favorite colors, basically. But if you have a special color in mind, we have more options. We have our frames custom powder coated right here in San Francisco, and you have about 200 different choices. One of my favorite things is to see the light bulb go off over people's heads. If I didn't have to just pick a boring, ugly bike, pre-built off the shelf, if I got to choose the color of the frame, the color of the wheels, if I got to choose the riding position and the handlebar style that I wanted, what would my bike look like?
A third of our customers, I think, are designers. So you can be a designer on the web and you can learn that trade, and you can be a designer in architecture, you can learn that trade, but it's very rare that you get to walk in and be a designer for bicycles or for your city, how you experience the city or anything. That's the empowerment piece of what we're doing. We actually literally enable people who have a design eye to design their dream bicycle, and then we go and build it.
The frame is set and it's ready, and any parts you want to switch out or upgrade later on, this is done. You don't have to worry about it anymore.
You're just cleaning it out so that.
Yeah, so from now on, anything you want to install will be ready to go.
I'm not usually a details person. My brain doesn't work with the details. So when they started going through all the details with me and I saw just how many different things on a bike you can customize, I kind of started thinking that I should start paying attention to these things because it'll really affect my relationship with my bike. I kind of already knew what colors I wanted, and they walked me through everything online and then showed me everything in real life.
Traditional model is we're going to build this thing and we're going to try to sell it to you, and you either take it or leave it. Yeah. And then I think that's maybe fine if you don't have direct access to consumers, but when you start to use technology like the web, or you have a store where you can keep a lot of different parts and have really smart people put them together, you suddenly are less about saying take it or leave it and more about saying what do you want.
Last week I was at my office seeing patients, and when they told me my bike was ready, I was so excited I left patients in my waiting room waiting to see me and came down the street to get my bike. And then went back to work, and I was really excited. So now that I see that I was riding a bike a lot and it was my main mode of transportation, I wanted a bike that I actually enjoyed riding instead of riding because I felt like I should or had to.
One of the things that we want to do is push the store experience as far as we can go and use that as a way to inform what we need the web experience to be. And we really do treat it like a laboratory. The web experience to be an extension of the overall customer experience. And whether we need to have stores or we can do everything online, we're agnostic. Whatever makes the most sense, we'll do. We're not going to get it right the first time. What we do is really iterative. And what we do is it's really almost as much about learning as it is about producing. Things that we think are doable and putting them out there and learning and fixing mistakes and iterating and moving on to the next thing. And that's a design, that's fundamentally what I know of design, the design process. You have to iterate. So, and that's what we do.
Here's me getting really intense, but let me tell you, I'm laughing because the wave for me is not that big, but it's funny how it looks pretty. I'm getting all, cowabunga. To me, it's one of the most zen sports. You are in the water and you have to look at the horizon and watch the waves. And, it's very meditative. And because I'm such a multitasker, it's the one thing that gets me to stop thinking about everything else. Different companies say they believe and they respect design and they understand design, but their level of education in understanding how much you have to invest in design affects the type of person we bring to them. A company that's beginning to invest in design would need to look for someone who's more of an entrepreneur, someone who knows how to set the foundation of a design team, in addition to knowing how to design or manage. So it's very different than a company who has a team of 50, 100 designers, and they're looking for a new design manager. People used to debate, is the term industrial design correct? And people used to debate that it is hard to define to the public, to non-creatives. But in reality, the term industrial design to me is very effective. It means design within the business world. A long time ago when I started my company, I think 6 months into it, I got a cup. Instead of working, I just realized I needed to do something to inspire myself. And I wanted to know that one day we could make change, help the design business world understand the value of design. To the point that I took a copy of, I love Fast Company. I think Fast Company really tracks innovation, creativity in all aspects in every business world. So I took a copy of Masters of Design for Fast Company. In fact, I think that's Yves Behar in the back. So I feel sorry for him, but I put my face in front of his. And I even changed the words. Companies say we want to be the yay ideology of our industry. And I say, do you have the guts? And it has my, Angela Yay, CEO of Yay Ideology. How to succeed with style. What Angela Yay is teaching Coke, J&J, and Coca-Cola about designing matches. So that's our dream, is helping design integrate into the business world.
My name is Vince Ferron. I'm the head of design for Coca-Cola North America. Prior to joining Coca-Cola in 2006, I was with Apple full-time for 16 years. I've really, on limited occasion, avoided sort of dropping the Apple bomb, if you will, as to, when I'm inside speaking about design and educating team members or young designers, I may give relevant examples, but I never say, this is how we did it at Apple. When I first heard the term design thinking a few years ago, after I read Tim Brown's book from IDEO, at first I didn't really understand the term. We never, uttered that word. I never heard it at Apple's design studio. It led the design effort for one of, I think it was called the Flower Power, was the internal name for one of the iMacs, where it had the rear end of the iMac had an integrated graphic design of flowers or inspired from the 60s. And it wasn't a success. It lasted in the marketplace for 6 months. But you know what? It really taught us about in-mold decoration and form design and material exploration. One of the stories I heard about how this particular design was sold in is that they prototyped it and they just seeded it throughout the company. They would make 100 of them. They would just put them in conference rooms. And so business, brand leaders, marketing leaders, they'd be like, oh, wow, that's great. Why couldn't we do something like that? And what I'm most proud of, which was the design thinking led, is the way that we've developed the ADA user interface. We tested it at the Shepherd Spinal Cord Rehabilitation Center in Atlanta. It's an area where people have been unfortunate, have been in a car accident, et cetera, or they've become handicapped because of an accident, from children to older adults. When they realized that we actually went through this extra effort to enable them to pour their own Coke, I truly got goosebumps. And it beat every interaction I had with, Steve Jobs, Jonathan Ives, my great colleagues at Apple. Coca-Cola in a lot of countries is really viewed as a local company. And they have the love of their communities and their consumers. And I don't feel that Apple has achieved that. I feel that they have achieved maybe a love for their products, but I don't believe that if you go to, South Africa or Japan, that individuals actually really love Apple as a company. And that even in a way is design thinking, as the way Coca-Cola has chose to integrate into societies in over 200 countries.
Cups that I was given from Korea just yesterday. They're called moon cups. And you can see there's a shelf on the inside. So if you put, say, milk, a white liquid, into this one, so this looks like a full moon. Oops. But if we drink some, you can see it looks like a partial moon.
Well, the businessman, by taking one solution and testing it, wants it to succeed. The designer, by testing a number of things, knows some will fail, so he doesn't care.
Many, many large companies in the world will go and recruit straight out of Harvard Business School every year. The great companies in the world are not going and recruiting out of the great design schools.
They often just don't know what to do with designers. They don't know what to make of them. Designers often scare them.
They talk in the language of what is cool. They talk in the language of what is creative, but they don't necessarily talk in the language that business speaks.
I get comments back from our business leaders like, oh, I didn't realize those designers down on the 14th floor were so smart.
Business speaks a very finite number of languages. They speak in terms of a profit and loss statement, a balance sheet, and a statement of cash flows.
And organizations have been designed for most of the 20th century to be efficiency-based machines.
You don't want to experiment. You don't want to try out new things. You want to execute on plan and on budget.
Executives are saying, well, what part of that can I learn? Right? They get the creativity part of it. And they say, oh, this is about being more creative. Or they say, oh, well, no, this is about more of an element of play. And so they play with pipe cleaners and pixie sticks and clay.
Well, we tried that in 1975 and it didn't work.
There were local militias in towns of Holland, and they were actually paying him, Rembrandt, to paint them. They actually arranged because they paid different fees. So the guy who paid more got the front position. So who done the art?
This guy, Ted Nelson, realized that the coming age of computers were going to change everything.
And the interesting thing is, what is an artist, a truly great artist, doing with the brief? It's not writing the brief, it's what's happening after the brief.
And this half of it is education about computers, and this half of it is what the future might be like.
You know what, I think I need to go hire a plumbing thinker. You don't say that, you say I need to go hire a plumber.
Prototyping, testing, failing all the time, but failing quickly and cheaply in order to succeed.
You have found is that design firms will do something like say, well, we'll have an MBA run a spreadsheet on this at the end of it. And that in itself is a wrong idea. That doesn't work as well because you haven't really integrated it into the creation process.
Succeed or you're gonna fail. When you already invested 50 million, 100 million. So it actually becomes what some scholars call a wild-ass gamble.
Why is it that big, huge corporations get beaten by kids in garages?
Ooh, yeah.
Are they trying to replicate what's being done already? No. They're inventing the future. They've got nothing, absolutely nothing, and and 10 years later, they are bigger than Time Warner. And how could this possibly happen when Time Warner has all the resources? It's because Time Warner is trying to keep on exploiting the same things they do now, rather than inventing, right? Because they felt the pressure of keeping on earning high returns on an existing business model, and they couldn't step out of that and say, wait a minute, we've got to have 3 or 4 years of really crummy earnings while we completely restructure ourselves to be online, digital, etc.
This is actually the whistle from an Alessi kettle that was designed by Richard Sapper, and he wanted the sound of the kettle to be more interesting than a normal kettle. So he designed it so that there are 2 notes that when the steam comes through, it blows like this. That's one, that's the other, but together. And he gave me this as a souvenir when he'd come to make a Bill's Design talk.
So this is how it starts. It's this kind of big format. It gets redesigned several times. So this is when we cut back the size of the magazine to its to the smaller size. This was our 5th anniversary issue. This was our 5th anniversary, and then this is our 30th anniversary issue. So it's quite a change in size.
So the hub is, we're not quite comfortable with the term co-working space, but in a way it's a space where people come together, but not just any type of group. It's a social entrepreneur. People are working in social innovation.
So I work out of the hub. I collaborate with my team. We have a very international scattered team. So nobody is in the same place at the same time. So we use technology to communicate so we can understand what the team is doing and where they're at.
The fundamental nature of work is changing. You don't need all these offices. You just need a laptop connectivity and a great place to hang out and a good chair to sit in.
I think it's a combination of a lot of different things. Because if I just wanted to be around other people, I could work at a cafe or in the library. But being here, I think it has a lot to do with the energy of the other people who are here. The network that the hub provides. I mean, it really is a hub for people who are interested in social innovation.
So social entrepreneurship is a fairly new term, and it gets kind of confusing, especially in the era of social media. Is social media social entrepreneurship? No, completely different things. So first of all, a social entrepreneur, let's just say, is somebody that's, as an entrepreneur, that's doing something that's of benefit to society or of benefit to the environment or the world in general, you could say it that way. So that's how we loosely define social entrepreneurship.
There is no them. What happens in rural Thailand, for example, affects people here in San Francisco just as much. So I think that having the awareness of that we are all in this together, we all have some skill that we can contribute that will be valuable in moving us forward, is something that more people are tapping into.
We just had our next generation design competition winners announced. They create an algae farm on the facade of the building, which is, and you know that algae lives on carbon dioxide, so it lives on the dirt that we produce. And it's a very important, it's going to be a very interesting resource of energy. The architect has to reach out to the biologists, to the other scientists, to the physical scientists who know how these systems work, and put this information into the brief about the building. It's become an example for me of what 21st century thinking, design thinking should be about, which is collaborative, which is technically informed, which is historically connected, which is culturally connected, which is environmentally aware.
We thought about what's the right environment for people working together.
We have the kitchen area, which serves as like a cafe-style setting. Rather than just go with traditional cubicles, we wanted to work with something that's a new design.
Anybody that wants to walk between the two spaces needs to walk through the art gallery. And there's something there that's inspiring as well. Art inspires the entrepreneurs inspire the artists, and starting to connect that. But we also have ongoing workshops that we do almost on a daily basis.
Things like, hub office hours, and the office hours are like half-hour sessions with like a lawyer or with an accountant or with a designer to try to understand a little bit better how we can actually help that business.
We believe that there are certain things that the nonprofits really need to be there for. But one thing we're really trying to emphasize here, because it hasn't been done so much, is for-profit social entrepreneurship. And if you think about it, if you get one of these entrepreneur groups kicked off with a little bit of money to help them get to the next level, they're off to the races, and they're scaling up their business, and you won't need to fund them anymore. They've got a little business that now is running and up and going. So now I can fund this one, and fund this one, and fund this one, and fund this one.
People get really excited and turned on by this idea of somehow an intersection between their values and ultimately what they care about in the world, and their lifestyle of wanting something that's convenient, something where they're going to live well by doing good, is becoming a more and more attractive idea to people.
These are the people. This is the collaborative group that I mentioned. So they're all young people, and this is what it looks like. This was the old building that they remade, and this is what the new stuff looks like with the algae on the facade. And then this is a detail. So it's pretty cool stuff when you think about what changes can be made and how a boring kind of mid-century modern office building can be turned into something beautiful and be part of the community's life.
The thing that excites me the most about this, I think excites most people, is we have a chance to really move the needle. We have a chance to make a difference on a significant level when we get all these pieces moving together. That's what gets me up every day.
Some people are really good at sitting on things like this. I'm not. So as you can see, this is probably needs to be inflated, but apparently if you sit on this actually gives you a better core. Jump Associates is a strategy consulting firm, and we spend most of our time working with companies to solve highly ambiguous problems around growth. The rest of the company and get comments or get ideas, they can spin it around and basically post stuff on the outside, and people are able to then comment on it. And that typically means taking a non-traditional approach to solve questions that they have where they don't necessarily know what the right answers are. They don't even know sometimes whether they're asking the right questions in the beginning. Affectionately called a Zen room. And one of the benefits of a room like this is that you're not sitting in a normal office chair, you're not sitting at a normal office table. We're having deep discussions about what's the vision about the greatness of their company, what's the vision about what kind of impact they could have on the world. Set up to be reminiscent of an old style diner booth, right? And you're talking and it's late at night and you're hatching plans about how you're going to go about changing the world, right? And even when you've got a great idea, you reach over for the napkin and you just scribble a great idea down on the napkin there. And we know what that script looks like. We will often say in the middle of the meeting, okay, everybody switch chairs. Find a different chair in the room, and you have 10 seconds to do that. Why? Because you've been thinking the same thing, and you will see things from that perspective. Give yourself a different perspective. There have been project rooms where I walk in and there's not a chair to be found because everybody's on some sort of other seating contraption. We want someone, as they happen to be walking between the cafe and their office, to walk by the library
library and say like, oh, you know what? I hadn't thought about that. That might be an interesting book for me to go and look at. I've been trying to think about this issue of pricing. This may be a book that I might want to actually consider.
Here's a page, Carol, called The Design Problem, a process as a problem-solving journey. So, when you think about things like design thinking, like it all sounds new, but this is stuff that was created back in 1972. I think it's hard to take yourself too seriously when you're sitting on a big purple ball, honestly. And so much of coming up with great ideas is really about giving yourself the freedom to think crazy, to think wild, to not be constrained by what exists.
And what you want to do is you want every designer to be able to move up and down that line. Now here, the reason you want to end up there is not because it's more important than the craftsman down here, but because that's where business values the contribution design can make more. And so that's where you want to be. And down here, with technology offering an increasing number of tools to all citizens, it becomes a generic product. And up here, it becomes a unique product which has much greater value. So that's what has happened to AIGA. We represent the experience design spectrum. For democracy to work well, there has to be trust between the government and the citizen. And trust is established by understanding and communication. And almost all of the communication between a government and a citizen is based on asking for information or giving information, which means that democracy depends upon information design. Now, when the government came to us and asked us to redesign the ballot, we said we wouldn't redesign the ballot, but what we would do is redesign the election experience, because it's not the ballot that's critical, it's the experience from the time a citizen discovers that there will be an election to the point at which they understand the issues and go through the process of actually getting to a voting place, marking a ballot, and then leaving that space confident that it was marked properly and it was counted. And that's the whole election experience. Now there's a case where instead of designing a ballot, we redefined it to design an entire experience.
I'm Jennifer Polka. I'm the founder and executive director of Code for America. We're a nonprofit that works with governments and brings the talent of the technology industry into working with city governments. A lot of people think it's not possible to change government. I think that they can be forgiven for having that view because they've gone to the DMV and been frustrated. The forms look the same as they did 10 years ago. One of the things that people as citizens don't realize is that bureaucracies have evolved because of our needs and our demands. We've made them what they are. Certainly we have made city officials, elected officials, bureaucrats extremely afraid to do anything wrong because we hold them so accountable to doing it right every time. There's a real sense that you have the public safety in your hands, and that if you mess up, really terrible things will happen. It's totally antithetical to the culture of startups in Silicon Valley, where the idea is try something, if it doesn't work, it was probably only a couple months work anyway, throw it out and start again. A big part of it with city governments is just getting them comfortable with the idea of experimentation, about trying something. A really concrete example there is they're used to only putting out web apps or software or websites that are completely done and have been checked by the lawyers and signed off on by every city department. So when we put out a really early beta product and say play with it, and then we'll improve the product based on the user feedback, they get very nervous because you're putting out something that isn't accurate or isn't right or isn't been vetted properly. And that's a place where we can help them understand the role of a beta, help them caveat it properly, just help them sort of get comfortable with the process that's very common here in Silicon Valley. Code for America as a program is an experiment now because we're trying to get the program right. The program can't be about delivering a piece of software at the end of the year. The program has to be about a deep engagement between the fellows and their approach and City Hall and their traditional approaches. Get some experience with that. It's not going to change how City Hall works full scale in 1 year. It's not about that. It's about experimenting. We consider our model open source and encourage anyone who wants to try it to simply learn from what we've done and adapt it to their own circumstances, because I don't think a direct translation of what we're doing will necessarily work in some country. I don't really have enough experience in those other countries to tell them what would work. They'll have to figure it out.
I would issue a warning. Actually, maybe that's too strong.
That's going in.
I don't want them to come after me late at night, you know, in a dark alley.
They're all on the West Coast, so.
My interest for the last several years has been to have a better dialogue about design and design thinking. And so the idea of having a film which explores that, I think is a fantastic idea. I mean, it allows you to look at it from multiple perspectives. It allows us to have a debate kind of in real time without it being in real time.
People are talking about design thinking because it's a bit fashionable. And the result is we've had some backlash recently that some people are saying, oh, I hate the word design thinking because they've seen things that weren't successful.
Then you might well say it doesn't take a designer to do that, and that's absolutely true.
Some of the aspects of design thinking are simply suggesting that designers are not thinking.
First of all, if you're only thinking, then you're not doing, and you have to do in order to know, and you have to know in order to think better.
Which requires a lot of intuition and requires some level of serendipity.
I've known some designers they're beautiful at form givers.
They're not going to be replaced by design thinkers.
But they're absolutely incapable of solving ambiguous problems.
When you look through here, you can see an image in 3 dimensions.
This idea that I originally got from Virginia Postrel, who's the design writer and design critique, which I thought was wonderful, where she talked about how I'm a professional author.
I don't think I could run a restaurant.
But I don't complain that other people write.
Even though I ran a pretty successful design agency.
You know, I believe everybody should be able to write, but I'm a professional author, which means I think maybe I can write a bit better than other people can.
If you call it integrative thinking, then there's no problem in designers being involved in it.
It's only a term, it's only the start of a conversation.
They inevitably come up with a product or a small design service. Well, is that the right solution? Or is that just a solution that you could make because you were a designer? That doesn't necessarily change the fact that nonprofits of the world are completely underfunded. It doesn't matter what the problem is. I can go in and solve it because I'm a designer.
Why the heck aren't designers changing the world?
You can't. You didn't study the problem. You don't understand the problem until you go and actually spend time really diagnosing and having really deep empathy for those complex systems that are there. Then and only then can you really be able to offer credible solutions.
And I'm absolutely not trying to say there's one way to think about design or that design thinking is some sort of dominant idea in design. It's not. But it's a way of having a conversation with the world about how design can have more impact.
I mean, it's a lot like karaoke, right? You got to kind of like get out, take a chance. You know, it doesn't matter if it's, you know, how good it is really. You know, that's not the point. You're like trying to open up, right? So is there anything dangerous about karaoke?
Well, where do you want to start from? I've been a cook for many years, and prior to coming here, I was an actor in Los Angeles for 10 years. I did a lot of TV work and theater work, and I got a phone call from a company and asked me to do a corporate event. We did that event, realized that there was a potential market for team building and also for cooking parties.
So we started Hands-On Gourmet out of a garage in the Castro. We built some shelves. We had racks on the side, pots, pans, cutting boards, linens, chef jackets.
And if you look back through history and throughout the beginning of time, the one thing that's always brought people together is food, 100%.
Every person in the kitchen is working together to make this beautiful plate of food come out at just the right time.
I mean, we're an entertainment-based business, and it's really important to get chefs who are really talented, but that can also deal with people.
The chefs are there to facilitate.
Have to have patience, and they have to be the ability to work with people and also be a host, really.
When we work with accounting firms or bankers, they come wearing suits.
And they might sit back for a little bit and, yeah, I don't want to do that, that's fine. You know, they're on their cell phone. Then they look over and everyone's like having fun and they're like, phew. And so those people are actually the people that have the most amount of fun, because next thing you know, they're throwing pizzas in the air, you know, they're having a good time.
I think what they like most is it's an icebreaker.
And it really helps kind of make people feel at ease. And because we're not a cooking class, we're a cooking experience, and so people don't have to feel like they have to perform, so they just have to come in and have a good time. You know, the thing about here is that in the beginning of the events especially, you need to get people excited about the events. I mean, because this is a theater, if you want to really like it, this is a big stage. The connection to my acting is taking the entertainment side and then folding it in with the cooking side. So it brings these two together, which seem to work.
We have a whole range of clients, really. We had a group of consultants come. The challenge they're faced with every day is solving problems that don't have a clear solution. So what they did is no recipes, and there were 3 teams, and each team had a different set of ingredients. Their challenge was to come up with a dish using all of those ingredients.
Design is very important from a lot of different elements, because you want a lot of this energy and this creativity. You want to create this space that makes it feel warm. And the big thing that I learned from here is one word, restraint. I wanted to look at it from an element that people come in and feel comfortable. You don't want a lot of stuff, but you want enough stuff. And so it's very difficult to hold back and to not put more things and more colors and all those things. So if you look around, you'll see that it's a very open space. And when people come in here, and that's very important, they're wearing clothes that have color. And also on the tables, there's vegetables and fruits. So every day actually, we design a new space. I guess just making people happy, really. That's the best part of it.
Dealing with and redefining healthcare, is that a political problem? Is that an economic problem? Is that a business problem? Is it a religious problem? Is it a science problem? The answer is yes, it's all of those. If you want to be able to solve all those, you're not going to get anywhere by just putting a rabbi and a politician and an economist in the room. Although that's beginning to a really good joke.
It did take us quite a long time to really get good at working together. And we achieved that by putting people into the same room in small studios, so that there was a chance for the engineer to sit next to the human scientist, to sit next to the designer.
It's not enough to simply have a multidisciplinary team. You have to have multidisciplinary people. Society doesn't do a very good job of promoting hybrid thinking. Society does a very good job of trying to strain it out. And what that often looks like is that we tell people from a very early age, you've got to focus. You can't look at everything. We tell people that you have to pick one major when you get to college, right?
I have 3 different disciplines. You know, I started off in electrical engineering. I then received my master's in business. And then I went back to get a master's in human factors design. And I truly believe that if you can't reinvent yourself, you can't reinvent a team.
What I really respect about, for instance, the movie industry is that they developed a very astute sense of respect for each one of the crafts. And with design, it's really blurry.
Yep, here we go. And action.
My name is Jack Perez. I've been directing for about 20 years. My last film was Some Guy Who Kills People, a comedy thriller, executive produced by John Landis. I also directed a film called La Cucaracha and The Big Empty, made in 1997, and Monster Island for MTV, and Wild Things 2, and the pilot for Xenia Warrior Princess, and a whole bunch of stuff. The irony is the one film that most people know me for is the film that I'm least proud of, which is this Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus, which is, you know, really the shittiest movie in my entire filmography. And not necessarily, you know, it's not my fault entirely, but it's funny that that became the one that people know me for. The making of a film is, a huge project. It's something that starts on paper. In this case, it's a script, and then continues through the paper process, through storyboards, conceptual illustrations, and then it becomes a matter of translating all of that into an actual physically shooting the movie and then cutting it and then mixing it and on and on and on. So in a lot of ways it's like building a bridge or any huge project, where you have a lot of people, but you do need somebody in the director really to have a very strong vision of what he wants in order for that information to be funneled properly through all of these people so that it turns out to be like those storyboards or those conceptual illustrations. A camera can be wielded like a brush. So in a way, you can imagine a painter, if somebody else was using the brush, and the painter was trying to tell the guy who's operating the brush, this is the kind of stroke I want. Sometimes you feel that way. Design thinking, I haven't heard that expression before. Well, I think that, prototyping is something that can happen in film. Sometimes there are tests, there are wardrobe tests or tests with preliminary special effects tests. The nature of collaboration is people are going to bring something to it. Ideally, what they do is they take what you have and enhance it. And I think the foolish director is the one who doesn't consider other people's opinions who he's working with. Because you're working with so many different people, you want to work with people who see the way you see. Because if you work with a cinematographer whose vision of the world or this particular story is so drastically different, or a production designer whose color choices or textural choices are different from how you see and feel it, it's going to be murder getting what you want on the screen. You're going to be fighting and arguing and trying to get your voice heard.
Get him! Back! That's it! Whale him!
I once had a guy come to me and literally say, "It ain't show art, kid. It's show business." The problem is that, and it's not exclusive to filmmaking, but the people that make film, physically make the film, are of a different mindset than the people that are, behind the scenes business-wise. They're completely different personalities. It's a question of priority. The value system is different. So you can't expect an executive or a businessman to value art the same way an artist does. All you can hope is that they see some of the value in what you see and support that, or find a way to financially support that. And it's also up to the creative filmmaker to understand that you can't have everything you want, that things cost money. In the film world, every day costs a certain amount of money. Equipment rental, salaries, and if you go over a certain number of hours, you're into overtime and a big expense. And in the beginning, I didn't know that. I just thought, well, it's just the studio movie is just a bottomless pit of money. You just do it till you get it right. And like my very first time out, this producer grabbed me and said, "Listen, kid, if you don't get this done, before 7 o'clock, I'm firing your ass." And at that moment, I was like, well, they didn't teach me that in fucking film school. Film, a director is in control. I mean, a control freak is the natural personality for a director. You want to control this little world you're making. Sometimes you take too much control, or you realize, or you forget that life cannot be completely controlled. Life is much more complicated and chaotic. Film is just an echo of that.
Cut, that was a good one.
Doctors have this funny situation where we want them to quickly diagnose us. On some level, I don't want my doctor to be creative. It's like, I want my doctor to be really good at the surgery or what is, and do it exactly the same way that worked last time, and don't try new stuff on me. The doctor says to you, I don't know, let me go and do some studies and come back to you in a while, right? It doesn't make you feel well.
The danger of the whole design thinking movement is that people will try to push it so far that it makes it a formula. There is a great desire to push things to algorithms, to like a strict formula. And the reason is that with an algorithm you can be extremely efficient. You can be completely rule-based. You have a process where you can just analyze your way to answers. And design thinking is never going to get there. And when people reduce design to a formula, I think they will lose virtually all of the value of design.
When we're innovating, what we want to do is look for the outliers. We want to understand the outliers and say, here's something that doesn't fit the pattern. Why is that? Does this give me a new insight or a new way to do things? So innovators are actually searching for the outliers. There's a disciplined optimization, things like Six Sigma, right, where we're really trying to narrow down on a problem. But there's also a disciplined innovation. That discipline's a different kind of discipline. It's a discipline of doing very controlled experiments, saying, okay, I'm going to have a hypothesis, I'm going to test that hypothesis, learn from that, change my hypothesis, and move on.
So my name is Tony. I'm from Taiwan. I'm a fourth-year graduate student in Stanford University in the Department of Systems Biology. My projects involve looking at how frogs develop and how human white blood cells move. We raise frogs in our labs. So we typically inject hormones to the frogs when you want to induce them to lay eggs. This is actually human hormones. In Africa, when they don't have the real pregnancy test, what they do is actually they have women pee on the frog. And then the frog lay eggs the next day. It means the woman is pregnant. We only take their eggs. We don't do anything with the frog. They can lay like thousands of eggs each time. And sometimes we just need one. In this department, in the second year, we have to propose a proposal which you describe the question you want to answer throughout your PhD. What I heard is probably 90% of the time, when you graduate and you go back and look at what you proposed in your second year, it's usually not the same. We propose a question and then we have to always modify our question or modify the experiments that we do. So it's really an iterative process. During my second year, I proposed a model that I feel very excited about. I made some predictions of my model, and I want to do an experiment to test it. At that time, it's really hard for me to think about alternatives. But then the more I test it, the more I convince myself that it is not right. And it takes a lot for me to believe that it is not right, because this whole lab and a lot of other labs has done a lot of things based on this assumption. But then I finally decided that I want to prove that it's not right. You can't just come in and destroy everything and tell everybody that you're wrong and then go away, right? You need to come up with some new model that is consistent with the past observations. It's more like I definitely have more understanding now on this question. If 10 scientists are doing the same thing and trying to answer one question, the answer should be the same. Otherwise, it's not called science. Because if we want to study what causes this disease, it should be one answer, right? For example, a doctor cannot be creative. Your ultimate goal is the same. You want to cure the patients. But what's different? The creativity comes from the process. So there will be people who follow traditional ways, but then there will be people who are creative enough to come up with new approaches and get to the answer faster. So I have not heard of design thinking before you told me about it.
So in regards to what you do in your lab, do you think you're a designer?
Yes, I design experiments. So I will not say I design a question. I identify a question. But then after I identify a question, I design the experiments and the process to answer this question. Probably every few months, or maybe once every year. You sit down and think about, am I really doing the thing that are important, or am I just doing something that are not relevant?
It's a very interesting story about how design managed to not explain itself through the last 100 years.
There was a point at which design was about form. Mid-century, in the last century, it was all about form. Then it became about form and content. So in other words, the designer became responsible for the message or for the function as well as the form. But now it's about how a designer can deal with a problem considering the form, plus the content, plus the context in which people have to address the solution over time.
If we can start to show examples of our best selves, entrepreneurs and others that are doing good things, regular everyday people that are doing great things and having impact, somebody somewhere is going to say, wow, that person, I could do that.
And I think that's the most important thing to look for, is where's impact happening? Is this idea helping us do better things in the world than we were able to do before? Is it allowing us to bring people together to work on creative things who would never have imagined being creative in the past, or never imagined working together? Or if they did come together, they wouldn't have had a language or a methodology to use to actually get to an interesting place or an interesting solution. And if we're not having an impact, ask the question, why not? What can we do to improve?
There are the kinds of people who feel that this is dangerous. I want to know the formula. Tell me the Black-Scholes option pricing formula, or tell me what are the 4 Ps or the 5 forces, and I want to do the analysis and get the right answer. And others just feel that they're freed up. They feel, oh, you mean I don't have to get the right answer right away? You mean I can dream about what might be? You know, it feels like they're saying you've taken my shackles off. You know, the world is a very diverse place, and I'm happy to have that diversity.